focused on woodpeckers. Well, tonight I have the pleasure of introducing Paul DeMaggio. Um, Paul's the water resource engineer with Jackson Soil and Water Conservation District. He's had over 12 years of experience working on agricultural, water resource, and water quality projects in Jackson County. He's a registered professional agricultural engineer in the state of Oregon, a certified agricultural irrigation specialist, certified irrigation designer, and he has a BS in BioResource and Agricultural Engineering from Cal Poly State University in San Luis Obispo. And I could say that, in my previous job for the last 13 years or so that I worked at the Freshwater Trust, I collaborated with Paul many different times and was just always so happy and impressed and stoked that we have a resource like Paul and his personality being so responsive and keen to help people out in this region with irrigation and water stuff. So with that, I want to welcome Paul. Thank you for being here. And we're really looking forward to your presentation. I'm going to go ahead and stop my screen share.
You want to watch this thing on water supply?
All right. Thanks, Eugene, for the introduction. And yeah, I've attended a lot of these land steward presentations over the years and presented quite a few as well. And it's always a good mix of folks. And I like to have it be an interactive experience so that everybody hopefully gets a little bit out of it. So I really encourage lots of questions and then follow up after the fact. That's fine to shoot me an email or even send me a text on my work cell phone because each individual property is different. Each individual water resources is a little different. And so happy to assist. That's part of my job. I really like helping folks out. And if I can't find the answer, I'll point you to somebody who will. So thanks, Eugene. And so I will share my screen and we'll get it started here. We tested this out earlier. Hopefully this works. Normally I do this presentation in person. Okay. So let's see, actually, I'm going to share this one. Okay. Can you see the presentation there, Eugene?
Yeah,
Yep.
that's looking good.
All right, great. All right, so welcome to Understanding Water Supply in the Rogue Valley, part of the Land Stewards class. I'm Paul DeMaggio with the Soil and Water Conservation District. So as we begin, I'd like to open the chat up. There's not a million of us, so I think this is doable, but please type in what area generally that you live in the county. So that could be a city nearby, nearest water source, etc. So I get a sense of where folks are in either Jackson or Josephine County. If you're outside of the area, that's fine too. You can put where you're from or even what area you're interested in. Sometimes we get folks who are looking to purchase property or farms in our area, and I provide them with some water resources assistance. And then also put in, what do you use your water for primarily? Is it domestic, irrigation, maybe you're industrial and you use it for making something. Okay, I see that you guys have the chats coming up. Jacksonville, Ashland, South Fork, Little Butte Creek, Illinois Valley, west of Talent, but uphill of the Talent Irrigation District. Indian Memorial Road, way up on Babe Creek, Grants Pass, Central Point, Applegate, drinking and gardening, domestic. So we got some on irrigation districts. We got some smaller domestic users off of their own domestic wells. Folks on some other smaller tributaries like Evans Creek. Okay, great. Well, that sounds like a good mix of folks, Illinois Valley area. All right, good. Well, thanks for typing that in. And also feel free to chat with each other on the chat. It won't pop up if you guys are typing stuff in. So hopefully this is a good interactive experience and you answer some of your questions. Thank you. Eugene did a great job of that introduction. It's hard to believe that it's already been 12 years. I think I wrote that before it was, but now it's been 13 years. And I've got all these certifications, but mainly the information I've gathered over those 13 years walking around on individual landowners' properties has really been the bulk of the knowledge I've gained here in water resources. Our agency helps private and public property owners with engineering and designs to implement conservation projects. I'm working currently with NRCS to get federal funds for converting from flood irrigation to some pressurized center pivot sprinkler systems here in the Jackson County. And then we're always looking to turn natural resource concerns into opportunities. My specialty is water, but there's other folks in our district who deal with weeds, weed management, riparian management, stormwater management, pasture management, forestry. So who is Jackson Soil and Water Conservation District? If you hadn't heard of us before, we're one of 46 soil and water conservation districts in Oregon. This is part of a national association of conservation districts. Each county in the nation has a soil and water conservation district. Some states call them resource conservation districts. California and Washington call them resource conservation districts. But we are all basically the same. We are looking to protect and enhance natural resources and while maintaining the local economy. The reason we were put into effect essentially was because of the Dust Bowl and realized we need local folks on the ground with the local agricultural community, the local producers, local managers of the land to prevent this from happening again. Since we're Jackson Soil and Water Conservation District, we work within Jackson County. Our tax base comes from Jackson County residents. And so while we can't work and do site visits in Josephine County, we can still provide general information over the phone or through an email. I've done that plenty of times. It doesn't take too much time, and I can hopefully point you in the right direction, maybe who to contact. We take a landscape approach to solving resource management concerns, try to make sure our advice is good for the property owner, good for the land and the water, and good for the surrounding citizens. So more on that, you can take a look at our website if you want some more details. And actually, I didn't have this on here, but we are actively hiring a new education and outreach full-time position. So please take a look at our website for that development. I think that came out last week, and that's a great opportunity to join us and help our cause. Thanks. Okay, so without further ado, what is the inland rogue? We're here to learn about the inland rogue or the water supply. So general area. This map is really rudimentary, showing the Rogue River going from Gold Beach to the Pacific Ocean up all the way to the headwaters of Crater Lake. It passes by Prospect, Eagle Point, Grants Pass, and then there's tributaries, primarily being Little Butte Creek, Bear Creek, which holds the majority of the population in the region, with Medford, Ashland, and in between there is Talent and Phoenix. There's also Central Point in there. And then the Applegate River and Illinois River are the other major tributaries of the Rogue River. Grants Pass is another population center along the Rogue River. That is just outside of Jackson County, where my boundary is. That's in Josephine County. So I haven't spent too much time in and around the Grants Pass area. But Evans Creek is within Jackson County. and spent some time on some projects up there. You can see here Lost Creek Lake, just north of Eagle Point along the Rogue River, is one of the major reservoirs in the area for flood control. Applegate Lake down here in the southern region on the Applegate River is also for flood control. And then there's a couple other little reservoirs in the other basin here that are used for irrigation. Here's another map showing Rogue Basin land uses, primarily forested, with as well as grassland and shrub. The dark brown is agriculture and the red is urban centers. This gives a sense of what areas are irrigated. The irrigated areas are the agriculture, what areas are not irrigated, the areas upslope, which are grassland and shrub, or non-irrigated grassland or rangeland. There's a lot of livestock in this region as well who utilize the grassland and shrub. There's elk herds, deer, etc., beaver, that utilize this habitat. Here's another map just put in here. This one is also available for print as a 24 by 36 map. I have this one in my office. It's a really good resource for looking at. You can't really tell on here, but you can see if it's a larger map. You can see the individual names of your creek. You can see the individual irrigation district canals. Some smaller towns are on this map, like Roosh in the Applegate here. We got Williams. This is a good resource for printing. And you can get that from the Rogue River Keeper website. So water supply, understanding water supply, I had to look at what the definition of water supply was, because that term gets thrown around quite a bit. There's multiple definitions. Merriam-Webster says a source, means, or process of supplying water as for a community, usually including reservoirs, tunnels, and pipelines. Britannica had a different one, available water provided to fulfill a particular need. I think that more meets what we're looking at here. This explains if the need is domestic, industrial, or agricultural, the water must fulfill both quality and quantity requirements. Meaning it's no good to have a lot of water if the quality is too poor to do anything with. So this takes into account that for water supply. In the Rogue Basin, we have longstanding supply systems in place. We've got irrigation districts, we've got canals, we've got municipalities, drinking water providers, and we're constantly evolving, updating those systems to meet evolving needs and to adapt to the changing climate. So I also looked up, because I was curious too, what the definition of water availability was, which is the amount of physically accessible and usable water, quantity and quality, in a specific place and time, considering the demands from humans and ecosystems, and how it changes due to climate, usage, and water rights. Is it clean enough? Is the water legally available? And is it sufficient for drinking, farming, maintaining healthy environments? The interaction between all these factors leads to complications. It's hard to answer those questions, and different people have different interests of how to use the water. Water data. I wanted to start off here after that, looking at available water data. We live in a time where this water data is now readily available at our fingertips. I've got too many resources now for how to get that water data, and the instantaneous water, I could look at, what the flow rate is in most creeks. I could even see the soil moisture in certain areas or the snowpack just by sitting here in my office. We have more information available at our fingertips than ever before. And without this consistent, comprehensive, and reliable water use data, we can't make appropriate decisions. The first one I would look at for water data available, if you're looking at what is water, I'm new to Oregon, where can I get information on water? It would be Oregon Water Resources Department. They have the central body for all the water resources. They handle the legal side of water, how much is available. They also have links and resources to stream flow and dams, etc. The second thing is this drought and water supply conditions report. This is, I get this emailed every 2 weeks. I guess I'll go here. Okay, so this is Water Resource Department front page website. Before I talk about that other topic, I'll touch on this again. Oh wait, I'm on a different slide. Here we go. Oregon Water Resource Department. This is their front-facing website. They've got information on water rights. They've got information on groundwater and wells, streams and dams, various news and updates. This is a really good landing page for any of your water-related questions. I use this a lot of times. I've clicked on various ones and I have those on shortcuts on my web browser so I can access them more quickly. But this has pretty much any information you would want. The other one that I mentioned is Oregon Water Conditions Report, which you can sign up to get this in your inbox every 2 weeks. This covers all of Oregon, and it covers your drought monitor. We're not in a drought right now. Snow water equivalent, how much snow there is. We're very much below the historical mean currently for this time of year. Precipitation, temperature, soil moisture, etc. It's like an 8-page report, and I just pulled this screenshot off of it for today's course. This is the snow water equivalent as of November 30th as a percent of 1991 to 2020 median. And we are at 11% median snow water equivalent compared to normal, as are all the surrounding areas. This means we have a very low snowpack currently. However, in the same report, it doesn't show that we are moving towards a drought yet, because the expected precipitation this winter is expected to be normal. Other water data that I utilize and that you could utilize too to see what flow rates are on tributaries: Little Butte Creek, Evans Creek, Illinois, Applegate, is the USGS, U.S. Geological Survey. They've been tracking stream flow since the 1960s for the most part in a publicly available setting. And then there's the Oregon Water Data Portal. This was brand new, launched in summer of 2025. I poked around there a little bit and I helped them do some beta testing of their site. And it has a wealth of information. Here's a screenshot of what that looks like. Oregon Water Data Portal. If you're interested in groundwater, surface water, water quality, water quantity, and infrastructure, you can start here and you work your way through these resources and hopefully find what you're looking for on a larger scale. And then NRCS maintains the snowpack information called the SNOTEL, snow survey. And that is also, these are mostly part of this resource this water supply conditions report that I mentioned earlier. That covers, oh, here it is. That these links and throughout this report covers most of these, and they've got links in this report as well. Next, I want to touch on our water supply and water availability, meaning all of our water comes from rainfall in our region. So it's appropriate to look at how our rainfall stacks up against others in our region. Here's our little red circle compared to the Western United States, and even compared to Western Oregon and Western Washington. You see, we are in a kind of a drier area here, similar dryness to other areas on Eastern Oregon or to the Mid-Valley, California. Here it is zoomed in. Medford gets around 18 inches of precipitation a year. But if you go, 30 minutes, an hour to the northeast towards Crater Lake, you're going to be in an area that gets more around 50 to 40 inches a year. Josephine County, Illinois Valley gets a significantly more rainfall per year than our area. There's some pretty popular information coming out of the Illinois Valley around regenerative agriculture, water use, slowing water down on the hillsides, catching rainfall, rainwater storage. That works well in these areas with higher rainfall sometimes, but in our area, the Mid-Valley, it gets really dry, really hot in the middle of summer, and we have a lot less rainfall to capture and work with in Medford compared to other areas in the county and in Josephine County. So all that to say, our county is not uniform. It depends on exactly where you are, what your water supply is going to look like, and what your challenges are. Oh, cool. I see that chat. Yeah, thanks, Eugene, for sending that link for the Oregon Water Conditions Report. That one's super helpful. Okay, on to more water data that's just available to everybody. There is surface water reservoirs and associated streams. USBR, U.S. Bureau of Reclamation, they handle irrigation related infrastructure, meaning storage for the use for irrigation. And so that's storage for the irrigation districts primarily, like Talent Irrigation District, Medford Irrigation District, Rogue River Valley Irrigation District, Eagle Point Irrigation District. Secondarily to irrigation, they manage those reservoirs for recreation. And then the Army Corps of Engineers, the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation, those reservoirs were built really with irrigation in mind specifically. So just keep that in mind. The Army Corps of Engineers, I remember what I was going to say. So because they're built for irrigation specifically, they can operate those based on the crop water needs of their constituents and of their farmers. For example, if everybody that's using water in the reservoir is growing a high water use crop like alfalfa or peaches or even pears, they're going to drop that reservoir down and it may get lower and not have as much carryover into the next year as compared if everybody that was irrigating grew a less water intensive crop or a spring fed crop or a spring grain, for example. They would be able to use less water from the reservoir to still meet crop demand and keep more water in the reservoir for recreation. So Immigrant Lake gets really low, goes up and down quite a bit, and that's because they're actively using it to grow a lot of the pears that we have in the Bear Creek Valley, as well as supply vineyards with irrigation and a lot of pasture and hay. Conversely, the Army Corps of Engineers, they manage reservoirs for flood control primarily. These ones were built after the 1964 floods. These were built back in the 70s, and that's Applegate Lake and Lost Creek Lake in our area. These are solely used for flood control. So they manage the height of the reservoir to provide the best possible protection against flood. That means currently they're low so that they can fill up and buffer any flood risks that may happen this winter. Each of these reservoirs has minimum required outflows for habitat. And then they also look at temperature of those outflows to maintain temperature for habitat in stream, primarily coho or steelhead. Here is this link. It's called a teacup diagram, which is a very official sounding name for these reservoir teacups. This is the Bureau of Reclamation's Rogue Basin project that was put together in the 50s. And you can see these reservoirs here, 4 Mile Lake, Fish Lake, Howard Prairie, Hyatt, Immigrant Lake, all are contributing to the irrigation around Medford, Ashland, Talent, Phoenix, and some areas in White City. Oh, and also Agate Lake. The green are irrigation canals. And what's interesting about this that's not specifically shown is that 4 Mile Lake, Howard, and Hyatt Prairie are in the Klamath Basin. These lakes transfer that water over to the Rogue Basin through these canals for irrigation for us. There's another interbasin transfer between Little Butte Creek, which is the tributary of the Rogue, and Bear Creek. And water is pulled from Little Butte Creek down into Howard Prairie, which is in the Klamath Basin, which then comes back into the Bear Creek and dumps into Immigrant Lake. So there's a lot of complex pieces here. They found water and they are moving it to where the good soils and the irrigation are. And this is typical for a lot of Bureau of Reclamation systems. And ours is no exception. You can go onto this website and you can click on these reservoirs and it'll give you an average storage. It'll give you what it is now, what it was historically. And then also this provides stream flows. These red dots are the stream flows. So today, Bear Creek at the mouth is 58 CFS. There's about 11 CFS coming out of Immigrant Lake. Here is the Army Corps of Engineers teacup diagram that's showing the Rogue reservoirs. So Lost Creek Lake here, this orange looking dam, and then Applegate, the Applegate Dam. And it's showing the total storage that's available currently. Also, the total capacity that's available for flood control. So Applegate is really low. It's at its low flood curve that it's supposed to be at. It's a little bit lower, and that's why it looks almost empty. That doesn't mean we're in a drought. It just means that they are preparing for a typical winter and a typical fill up to prevent flooding downstream. Similarly, Lost Creek Lake is doing the same thing. Each of these, you can click on each of these boxes and it'll tell you what the flow is at those places in the creek. And then these will turn different colors during flood events. So right now there's no alerts, but they'll turn red if there's a flood. Okay, so that's quite a bit of data already, but we'll keep moving on to the Oregon Explorer map. I use this one often for looking at canals, ditches. It has a really good layer of which streams are perennial, meaning they flow year round, which streams are intermittent, which means they flow typically only during the winter and spring. And then they also have ephemeral, they've got flow lines, which are areas where water might flow only during like a couple hours after a big heavy rain event. There's habitat, there's a ton of other information to explore on here. We could spend a whole hour or two just on this Oregon Explorer map, probably. So in order to plan all this water supply, what good is it? How are we going to use this to make management decisions? Um, it's important to look at long-term planning, but also short-term planning. So these are some resources for long-term planning of, how is this season shaping out to be? Is it, more going to be a wet season or a dry season? And then how accurate is that? So we have access to these, and I'll go through and do a share screen of my website. It's open in a little bit to share these after this slide, I think, to show this. But we've got a drought.gov, which is a super simple one to remember. It has all the states, and it's got all the counties. You just click on your county, and then it pulls up the information. This one as well, you can sign up for email alerts and webinars from drought.gov. For example, this December or next week, there's going to be a drought outlook webinar for our area, the Northwest. And those are good free webinars, and they discuss all things climate, what's going to happen in the next few months, what may have happened. Is it La Nina, El Nino? What does that mean for different areas? Very helpful. The ODA seasonal climate forecast also has a additional information about long range forecasts. And this guy also reviews the accuracy of his past predictions. So he'll do a prediction 3 months in advance. So right now he just did December, January, February. And then at the end of February, he'll go back and he'll review and say, how accurate was I? Was this a hit or was this a miss? And it's interesting to see that in our specific area, it's difficult to pinpoint the exact time, the exact month that water is going to fall, the exact snowpack that's going to occur in specific regions. So it's all it's a little bit of a mixed bag. So while I'm on that, before I go to the website, we'll talk about this real quick. Notable floods and drought. So water supply in our area is no different than other places in the West where there's large storm events, and then there's also long periods with minimal precipitation. So notable was the 1996, 1997 New Year's Day flood. That's the most in recent history that wrecked some areas in Ashland and caused some destruction of infrastructure near creeks. The 1964 Christmas flood, which was very much statewide, caused substantial damage and was the reason that Applegate Reservoir and Lost Creek Reservoir are now installed. This is a picture of Dodge Bridge on the Rogue River for that 1964 flood. And that link has a whole bunch of pictures of that flood. These floods were rain on snow events, meaning it wasn't just everything was already wet, there was normal snow, and then the snow melted and there was a flood. It meant that it was seasonably cold or unseasonably cold if everything froze, there was the soil might have been dry, but things froze and water couldn't get into the soil. And then it snowed on top of that. And then there was a warm spell, and then there was rain on top of all that snow and frozen ground. So that soil wasn't able to suck up any of that water, and all of it ended up as surface water in the streams. In 2021, 2022, there was severe drought, low reservoir storage. This is a photo of Applegate Reservoir, about what it looked like during that period. There's been many other multi-year low water periods, but yeah, recently, a few years ago, the folks that were most affected by the drought were the ones who relied on reservoir storage as their primary water source, as well as those who had maybe shallow wells who also somewhat relied on surface water storage or surface water interactions to have their wells work. So typical irrigation season might be 6 months. During this drought, the irrigation season and the water available was maybe 1 month in some locations. Other areas of the county, such as in Eagle Point Irrigation District, up by Eagle Point area and Prospect, or not Prospect, Shady Cove area, they had normal water supply and didn't have any reductions in their water available for irrigation. So it really depends on where you are, how those droughts are going to affect you. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen to a different slide here. Okay, so here is the drought.gov website that I mentioned. And here is the map of Oregon showing our drought monitor. A few years ago, most of this was this dark red color here, but now in our area, we're looking pretty good, knock on wood. We have little to no drought. And I can click on Jackson County, and it will open up our Jackson County page. There's 0 people affected by drought. That's great. Here's the drought monitor again. Here's our 30-day precipitation of the last 30 days, however, shows that we are well below normal for our precipitation rainfall that we're supposed to get this in November. Also, our temperature over the last 30 days has been somewhat above normal. So you may have experienced that. So there's historical conditions, but what I also wanted to look at here was stream flow data, which shows the current stream flow, and these can be clicked on, and it'll tell you what the flow rate is. It also should show 1 month precipitation outlook as being normal, because it's all white. So we should have normal precipitation over the next month or so. Goes over air quality. Here's another one, future conditions, 7-day precipitation forecast. This one is helpful because it shows these lines of where you might be in relation to precipitation, and then it tells you how many inches you might get. So if you're down here in Medford, we're going to get between less than 0.1 inches. But if up here, closer to Crater Lake, you'll get a little bit less than 0.5. The rest of us, we'll see about less than 1/4 of an inch, 1/10 of an inch to 1/4 of an inch over the next 7 days. So we'll see if that holds true. Okay, there's some other maps here. Here's the Oregon Explorer map viewer. I have on all these layers. Well, when you first start out, you're here and you have to click on layers, go to layer list, and then it has all these different layers, so many different ones, cities, animals and plants, fish, et cetera, et cetera. For this one, I turned on water and air, rivers and streams. We can turn on lakes also. Just start clicking buttons. You won't break anything by clicking a bunch of buttons. And then you can zoom into where we're at. So let's say we want to look at, um, Hanley Farm or, um, the SOREC Extension Center here. There's the baseball field, Jackson Creek. So here we're pretty close, and it gives you the stream, and you can see that it's dashed. So that's a intermittent stream. There's all these different creek names. I pull this up a lot when I'm looking at what creek people might be on. Property over here might be, they're on Griffin Creek, but there's also this stream that comes in here. And they may be wondering what that's about or how they can access it, etc. This is also something that I can pull up. I have experience with, so you can contact me, give me your address, and I can pull this up and print it and then email it to you. And it'll have all these lines on here with the legend of um, what they all mean. So I'll go back to sharing my presentation. And then also, I think this is a good half point to maybe answer a question or two that might be in the chat.
Great. Yeah. We have a question from Gordon. What's the percentage of storage compared to normal for this date? I think he was talking about the reservoirs. And any
Sure.
thoughts on that?
Yeah, we can, I will share my screen and we can explore that together. I don't know it off the top of my head, but
And
let's
Paul,
do, what's
just
that?
to give you a heads up, you got about 20 minutes or so. Leave a little time for questions.
Oh yeah, it's already 6:48. Okay. So so let's do, here's the Bureau of Reclamation, Columbia Pacific Northwest region. Let's click on Immigrant Lake. Here it is. They only pull up initially a couple days, but you click on water year graph, and then this will pull up where we're at. So current year, previous year in green, current year in blue, and average is in red. So we're below average for this time of year. But if you look at that, doesn't really tell us much because it really depends on how much rainfall we get in the next few months and how much snow we get. That's going to determine if Immigrant Lake fills up or not. So depending on which reservoir you're looking at, each one of those can be clicked on. So for the sake of time, I'll go back to my presentation here. Okay, so notable floods and droughts. Available day-to-day climate information is super important. Um, my dad's got a small farm out in South Medford, and he bases his decisions on whether or not to irrigate based on, a week's forecast, not based on all this other climate info or even stream flow data. He has a bulge pond that gets filled up by the irrigation district, and then he pumps out of that. And so these are the best ones I've seen for determining when it's going to rain, if it's going to rain in our area. National Weather Service You can click on a specific point and it'll tell you the forecast for that specific region. You can also get added to a mailing list for this one, but you have to email Bradley to get this, and it was helpful when we had some big rain events last year where it said, okay, everyone get ready, there's this big rain event, and it's an email, and then it's got some really good maps and really good information on that. So I'd recommend emailing Bradley. This is also in the PDF that Eugene sent out. This one has the best interactive radar that I've found for future radar to see if it's going to rain specifically where you're at over the next few hours, as opposed to there's a 40% chance of rain in Medford. Like, well, what does that mean? Is it going to rain on the softball game or not? So that's a good one. Water resources report is something I wanted to cover in this one that's really recent. This is called the Inland Rogue, a Water Resources Literature Review. And this is currently up on our website, but it was a joint cooperation with Oregon State University, Alicia and Henry and Aaron Wolf. And this summarizes existing literature on the basin to help inform future planning and decision-making processes. This compiled 70 to 100 different studies of water resources specific to the Inland Rogue area, this area that we're talking about, and summarizes it really well and pretty concisely, and it has all the references and it has all the resources if you want to do some additional deep dives into individual reports. But really broad understanding, good summary of historical and existing populations in our area, including indigenous populations, as well as water uses. I'd really recommend checking that out. Now we'll talk a little bit about surface water, groundwater, various things about water supply. So surface water means streams, rivers, lakes, reservoirs, anything where water is flowing over the surface of the ground, water that you can see. Our area's surface water comes from rain and snow, really diverse hydrology where the snowmelt feeds high flow rates in the creeks in the spring. We've got challenges from heavy water use from irrigation primarily, and then cities secondarily, which can lead to lower summer flows in the creeks and in surface water, higher temperatures in that surface water, which results in impacts on fish and habitat. That requires a lot of different management from various folks. You can click on these links to Rogue River Council of Governments, Rogue River Keeper, for example. There's other agencies as well. Soil texture, soil depth, soil health affect surface water storage and availability, meaning if you pave everything over, you'll have less stored water in the soil, you'll have less flow in the spring in your creeks, you'll have higher flows in the winter. If you maintain good soil health, you're able to capture more of that water in the soil sponge, and it will release slowly later in the spring and provide increased surface water flows later in the spring. I didn't touch on in this presentation, but I'll mention it here, is the climate change information we've been getting is that we may have a similar rainfall amount, but just we'll have less snowpack if warming continues, which means that there'll be less flow later in the spring. All the water will have ran out and the snow will all have melted earlier in the season. So that's important to note, especially if you are doing some management that requires some water availability and water use later in the summer or later in the spring. Groundwater. So what is groundwater? This is groundwater that's underground, not water that's on the ground. So this is well water. Most groundwater is located in a complex mix of hard rock formations and fissures. There's no aquifer in our region typically. So each individual well is going to have various levels of flow rate, 1 gallon a minute up to, maybe 50 gallons a minute. Um, there's only a handful that are used for irrigation that are high enough volume. Most of them are smaller for domestic purposes, and they're generally pretty deep. So here's water resources include drinking water, water for drinking, domestic wells, drinking water providers such as Medford Water Commission, other folks who are using surface water to bring to your house. Irrigation, there's private irrigation systems and then irrigation districts. Stormwater is a water resource. How are we managing stormwater? County roads maintains all their stormwater culverts, roadside ditches, etc. Individual cities have different stormwater management setups. And then wastewater. What do we do with that drinking water that's spent? How do we treat it? Where does that go? That's something that we're all looking into. Currently, in our area, the Medford or the Rogue wastewater treatment plant, they're looking for ways to recycle that water and then pump it back up into the irrigation system and use it for irrigation, which will keep more clean water in Little Butte Creek later in the summer to improve fish habitat and to improve the water that goes into the drinking water intake. Um, so it has a win-win-win for everybody. And then that hot wastewater doesn't end up in the Rogue River causing algal blooms and other problems. Here is a screenshot of the well report mapping tool I did for someone last week. They called and wanted to know what information on their well, and I just gave them this info and they were able to look at it. But you can search this by address, turn on your well reports here, and then you click on one of these little blue dots and it pulls up all the information of the well, like how deep it was, how big it was, what the flow rate was, when it was dug, etc. It doesn't give you the water quality of the well. That may be in a different location as part of the real estate transaction. But Oregon Water Resource Department manages this for any new well that's dug. And this is across the state. Drinking water providers, like I mentioned, there's a few of them. There's some that have some smaller areas like Shady Cove. This is the Rogue drinking water providers. Each of these cities may have different ways they get their drinking water. Each of these locations too has their own website. You can click on Google their website and they'll be able to point you in the direction if you want to know information about the drinking water. Irrigation water sources. This is what I primarily deal with. And so each individual property may get their irrigation water from a different location. It could be an irrigation district, which is a organization that their service they provide is getting water from the river or from a reservoir to your property. And they maintain that infrastructure, which could be hundreds of miles of canals that they have to maintain to pull water to get it to your property. The irrigation associations are smaller, but function similarly as an irrigation district. The fees for an irrigation district could be $70, $120 per acre to have access to that water. Irrigation associations or smaller community associations might be $20 to $50 per acre. Your irrigation system could also be privately owned. which means you could have your own pump or your own diversion from the creek or even your own reservoir that you operate. And that cost for that water is free. You are maintaining it yourself. You're owning and operating that system. There are many of those in our region, and those can be found through Water Resource Department, and those require a different set of technical assistance, and they have different options for improvement than an irrigation district might. Your water availability might be flexible or on a fixed rotation. You might only get water for a few hours every 2 weeks. That really affects water supply and how you're able to use it and what you're able to grow and what you're able to do. So I've taught classes just on irrigation water management, before. And like I said, contact me with specific questions. Here's an example of the Medford Irrigation District's new Water Supply Explorer map that I just looked at today. So it's showing they're not pulling any water into the canals, which they shouldn't because it's wintertime. So they have 0 CFS, 0, 0. This is basically 0. And it shows these reservoirs here that they use. And it also shows how percent full they are. And you can click on each one and it'll bring you to more information. So if you are within the Medford Irrigation District boundary, which is just this, you have more access to what your water supply and what your water availability is than any of the other irrigation districts or associations in the area. Medford Irrigation District is really spearheading some modernization efforts. They recently put a floating solar panels on one of their smaller regulating reservoirs in town to reduce evaporation from their regulating reservoir and to provide offset costs to their patrons to reduce pump energy costs. So they're really doing a good job. They're looking to pipe some of these canals too to save additional water. Other public maps that we use a lot, Jackson County GIS. I can go over that too, but we might be out of time. And then Medford Land Information System. If you live in the general Rogue Valley, including Grants Pass, Medford, Ashland area, they now have really high quality updated aerial imagery from I think August of 2025 and then every year back to 2020 that's better quality than Google Earth. And that can be used for a lot of land planning, farm planning applications that maybe Google Earth wouldn't be available for. Oregon water rights. I mentioned Oregon water rights. In our area, it's first in time, first in right. That means if somebody was here in 1850 and they filed a water right claim to Wagner Creek, then they would be able to pull that water as it's available. And anybody that comes in after them trying to pull water from Wagner Creek has to always ensure that that senior water user gets all of their water. So there's curtailments on Little Applegate River is what I'm aware of, where the Water Resource Department will go in and reduce water rights, reduce the junior water rights from 1950s or 1940s so that the water users that have 1800 water rights can get their water. Contact Oregon Water Resource Department for water rights on your property. They're available and they can come out and do a lot of stuff for you to help you determine what to do. This well owner's handbook is a great resource for anybody with a well, domestic well, irrigation well, or otherwise. This is from the Oregon Health Authority. It's got nice diagrams like this that show what you should or shouldn't do with your well. And this is one of my last slides here, and then we'll answer some questions. Water management of your water supply. There's a whole bunch of information we could cover here, but The cost of water can be a primary driving force behind your water management decisions. We're considered lucky enough to have a good amount of water to generally be able to do what we want with it, especially if you live in a municipality, or if you have a high producing well. Um, but like if you need to dig a new well because your well ran dry, then that's going to be a high cost, and it's going to really reduce the amount of water you're using and change your water management. Water policy and water rights, you're only allowed to use a certain amount of water at certain times. Different water uses and different management. So domestic irrigation, municipal, aquaculture, all different management requirements that are specific to that use. But in general, overall in our area, water use peaks in early mid-July because of irrigation and crop water use. And then we have minimal water use in winter for domestic uses. I live in Medford, and currently we're getting our drinking water, house water from Big Butte Springs. But in the summertime, Big Butte Springs doesn't provide enough water, so they supplement by pulling water out of the Rogue River so that we can irrigate our nice trees and our cherry trees and gardens. So there's a few opportunities for us to reduce water use. There's lawn replacement programs. We've got a rainwater harvesting rebate. And then depending on what you're looking for, we can help you find some solutions. Okay, so that's that. Thanks for listening. I know we covered a lot. Hopefully there's some questions, and if we can't answer them today, then hopefully we'll be able to answer them in the next few weeks if you shoot me an email or something.
Great, Paul. There was a couple of questions related to irrigation efficiency stuff that's happening in the valley.
Mhm.
Pete asked about the status of projects to enclose irrigation canals, and I think he's referring to like WISE plan and other things like that that are underway. Can you speak to any of that?
Yeah, so the recent project that was done was the through Rogue River Valley Irrigation District, Hopkins Canal pipeline project. They piped 3 miles, pressurized pipe, and that happened about 2018, 2019. And then based on that success and the funding for that, they're currently finishing up an environmental impact study for the Medford Irrigation District and Rogue River Valley Irrigation District canal that comes out of Little Butte Creek. That's the joint system canal. And so they're looking to pipe that. Um, and then any water they save with the pipe, so any water that's not that they save from seeping or evaporating out of the canal, gets put back into the creek for cold stream flows for fish habitat. They're also looking to, Town Irrigation District is looking to replace the Billings siphon that goes from the East Canal to the West Canal that goes under I-5, under Bear Creek. But I haven't called TID in a while, so I'm not sure of the status on that one.
I seem to remember some potential for micro hydro too, and that when you pipe these ditches, you can not only go to a more pressurized system and conserve water that's lost in the ditch, but perhaps even make a little power off it in certain points too.
Yeah, that a joint system canal one, they're going to do looking at micro hydro for that to help um, provide power to some of the local folks right around the area. And then the irrigation districts have piped almost half of their open canals to date. Every year they pipe or line a few 1,000 feet or so to fix the leakiest sections or the worst sections. And so while it is mostly open, they have been working to improve efficiency, especially as people build houses right next to the canal or in areas that used to be flood irrigated and now it's not. So
I know for myself, my flood irrigated property, just my line that delivers was piped a few years ago, And it made a real difference in consistency of flow. Um, where it would surge when it was an open ditch for various reasons. I'm not sure why, but with the pipe, I've noticed it more consistent. So there's maybe some advantages too at the delivery point, to these systems. I mean, there's a lot of conservation advantages to piping, but um, potentially provides more pressurized water to folks that just had flood out of before too.
Yeah, Talon Irrigation District has multiple laterals along their east side canal that are pressurized pipe. And a lot of folks are able to, they have access to pressurized water, but many of them don't have the ability to pay $100,000 for a new sprinkler system to access that pressurized water. Um, so you end up flood irrigating with a pressurized water system, which can be interesting.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, they've piped. TID has piped the majority of their laterals um, on that side. So.
Um, we had a question from Alicia about where can you find or where can you go for Josephine County water conservation or water information?
So last I checked, and I can check again, Josephine County didn't have, let's see, Josephine County property data.
A lot of those links you shared to, websites that are state and federal level probably have pages that are connected to water resources in Josephine County, although we don't have any major reservoir systems there, so there's not a lot in terms of teacup type stuff, right?
Right. The Oregon, which one was it? The Oregon Explorer has information around all of Oregon, and so that will cover Josephine County. It'll have all the creeks and habitat assessments for Josephine County, just like it does for Jackson County. So I'm pulling that up here. Let's see if it does. Yeah, so depending on what you're looking for, yeah, it's got it.
So folks can use some of those same links that are, you provided to access information from OWRD and other resources, and then just basically the map explorer links, like you could use that to explore your region wherever you are really in Oregon.
Yeah, the OWRD, um, depending on what you're looking for. Yeah, it really depends on what you're looking for. If you're looking for whether or not you can put a pipe across a ditch, you might want to use a different um, map. Or if you're looking for, I want to buy a property that's close to a perennial stream, you might use a different map.
I mean, at the end of the day, you can always call Josephine County Watermaster
Yep.
or stop in to pay them a visit. I think they're in the county building there, right? In Grants Pass, I believe. Is
Yeah.
it
Yeah. They're super
Scott
nice, super helpful.
Scott Cicilline? Is that
Yep.
right for Josephine County Watermaster?
Yep.
Um,
Scott is
a-
the one for Josephine County, and then Siobhan Haynes is the one for Jackson County.
I know sometimes landowners seem a little bit hesitant to reach out to the watermaster, but I would highly urge folks to make that connection. These are great people. They can be regulators, but when you approach them with problems you're trying to solve and they know you're trying to do the right thing, they're going to work hard to help you out. That's been my experience.
Yeah, mine too. If your intent is to do something correct, then they will help you and they won't fine you or slap you with something just because what you said over the phone.
Yeah. Hey, Alex asks, what is the landscape or what is a landscape approach? I think you referenced the landscape approach, and I think she's curious in the context.
Yeah, good question. And so that's something that we look at when we do a site visit. with property owners is look at where their water's coming from, what soils they have, what habitat they have, what riparian area or streams might be nearby, um, and take all that entire landscape into account when providing some type of recommendation for your goals. So if your goal is to, I don't know, put in a vineyard where it used to be a flood irrigated pasture, is that going to be appropriate given your soil, your water availability, what other habitat and other ordinances are going to help or hinder that application? How close are you going to try to get your vineyard to the creek? There's various rules and regulations around working in and around creeks or, um, you know, yeah, that's the landscape approach, as opposed to us being an irrigation contractor. There's a lot of great irrigation contractors out there, so I don't want to throw them under the bus too much. But if I was going to sell you something, I would say, yep, let's do this. I'll sell you whatever you want because you want to do this one thing, and I'll help you do that one thing. And I'm not going to look at any of the other factors that may affect your neighbors, that may affect downstream water users. So we're really in the business of making sure it's good for you, good for the land, good for all of the neighbors.
We had a question about how Water Masters information. I put a link up there you can use to explore, where your contacts are anywhere in Oregon through OWRD. But Scott Cicilline in Josephine County and Siobhan Haynes for Jackson County are our two regional local water masters, both great guys, very approachable. And then they have other staff there too that support them. So if you reach out to their office, you may contact them directly, or you might get one of their support staff. But either way, you'll get connected to the information you need from Water Resource Water Master.
Good. Thanks,
Uh,
Eugene. Thanks for sending all those links in the chat.
yeah, and again, like we mentioned earlier, there's a PDF of all these slides that'll go out with the link to the presentation. And Paul's links in the PDF should be live, so you can use those to explore around and follow some of this stuff. Before we went to questions, Paul, you were one of your last slides, you were looking at the Jackson County GIS. That might be an interesting thing to show folks how to access that. Personally, I find that a very useful tool for property ownership in Jackson County. We're really lucky. There's a lot of information there that other counties don't provide or don't give you for free. And Jackson County is pretty far ahead on that GIS stuff. So I don't know if you want to show folks that
Yes,
in
let's
our
do
last
it.
couple of minutes.
Yeah, because that is a super helpful link. So here we are, Jackson County interactive map. I already have it up, but if you Google Jackson County interactive map,
Or you can even do Jackson County JIM. I find that'll
yep.
get you there too.
So it comes up with a few things. Let's try this one and see if this one works. There we go. Jackson County interactive map, Jackson Gym. I've tried to shorten it sometimes by just typing in Jackson Gym, and that doesn't pull up the right thing. So you have to do Jackson County interactive map gym. But so then you can explore here, and it should open up Jackson County GIS. Then you got to go down to Jackson County interactive mapping. While we're on this page, though, this is a really nice site. They have cool old aerial photos that are real helpful for property management decisions. You can see, oh, there was a orchard on my property back in the 60s. And then also this 2-foot contour map I use a lot. This shows you elevations and helps with farm planning, irrigation planning, what have you. But for this one, we'll go to Jackson County Interactive Mapping. Oh, I guess I was already there, wasn't I? I did a big circle. So there's property permits, development overlays. I go to development overlays. There's more information on here, similar to what's on property. Permits has all the housing permits, building permits for each property. You can click on a property and it'll have, all 20 permits that a certain property might have. Development overlay. First thing I turn off is some layers. Actually, we'll zoom out to show what layers are on. So right now it's just kind of a blank map. It has urban growth boundary, the county boundary. This is the county boundary between Jackson County and Josephine County. It's got city limits, zoning districts. So I'm going to go over to my base map and turn on, there's various different imagery. I usually use the most updated one here. But let's zoom into a random property over here. So right now it's showing the zoning, EFU, rural residential 5. I can turn on wetlands. It shows up some of these wetland areas. If this blob shows up, you don't want to destroy this wetland. So generally stay away from it unless you hear otherwise. Essential salmon habitat. So this shows that this is Bear Creek. Going up here, there was some salmon. Where is it? Well, anyways, that's a good one to know because if essential salmon habitat ends here, you can do different things around this creek that's not essential salmon habitat that you wouldn't be able to do near and around essential salmon habitat. It also has streams, irrigation canals, a ton of info. Let's look back at this one here. I can click on the property. It'll also tell me the stream. No fish. This is Canuchin Creek. They did a survey back in 1999 for fish.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible the depth
Yeah.
of information that's in this tool. And it's like having ArcGIS, only, even somebody like me can navigate it who has no ArcGIS training. I've found it really useful for a lot of things on my properties, everything from doing due diligence before you purchase a property to understanding the permit history on your property, kind of understanding where you fall. Are you in an urban growth boundary, outside, all kinds of stuff. So really great resource. I'd keep this thing bookmarked on my web browser and use it all the time. Those tabs
Yeah.
Paul mentioned, the property permits, overlays, all that stuff. There's different information in each of those, but you'll find it fascinating if you dig in there, and you might learn something about your property you don't know by clicking on property and looking closely at the information the county has about it.
Yeah, and just that's been helpful for me is yeah, bookmarking these things. So go to bookmarks and then I can bookmark it. And then I've made so many bookmarks over the years. I've got a whole bookmark of just different maps. I've got a whole bookmark of just water data. Probably way too much information. But the other thing
Oh,
here, cool, is you can print it and it'll give you a print. Let's see if this pops up. Yeah, there's the printed view that we were just looking at. And with the legend down here that shows the zoning district. This is a freshwater wetland. There's a pond over here. What the stream class is. So yeah, like Eugene was saying, just super helpful.
yeah, and it's also a great way to, if you're a land steward already, then you have a property plan, and which includes maps, and you probably know what your APN or tax lot and parcel number are. But if you don't know that stuff and you're reaching out to the Oregon Water Resources about your property or other agencies, it's really nice to have that information and be able to give that to them when you reach out. That makes their job easier, and it's more efficient. It makes it easier for them to find the right information about your property and get it back to you quickly. So this is a good resource for sort of prepping yourself before you go have conversations with agencies or other resource folks who might be able to help you with things. Okay, well, I don't see any other questions in the chat. One last chance if anybody wants to pipe up. Otherwise, I think we'll let Paul go. And thank you, Paul. Great presentation. Really useful information for us landowners and water users. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Eugene. Thanks, everyone, for coming and learning, and hope to see you at some future educational events.
Well, we love having you as part of the Land Stewards program, Paul, and you've been a great mentor for lots of folks, landowners, and resource people like myself alike. So thank you, and thanks for taking time to get this